Welcome, 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 everybody. This is going to be a fantastic way to end the first day of our week, our stage management panel. It's going to be awesome. We have people from Broadway and tours and regional theaters, and I'm going to talk about this as a career path, those that maybe chose it from the very beginning as a career path, as well as those that transitioned into that and what that was like. There's so much to talk about, so I just want to get into introducing. Actually, I think this is our largest panel ever, which is amazing. So I'm going to do my best to highlight these videos as we go, and I'm going to go in order of the slide that was on Instagram. So first, an incredible staple here in Southern California, someone who I have grown to know and love and has done many, many shows here at 3D, both as an ASM and predominantly as a stage manager, Miss Donna Parsons. Woo! Yay! And then next person, truly family to me, someone I love so much and I deal with every single day, whether she likes it or not, but is not only a brilliant stage manager and ASM, predominantly ASM, and one of our resident ASMs at 3D, but also our production manager, Miss Teresa Hanrahan. Yay! And then we have, I'm not even following my own directions. I'm going to introduce this next amazing person, a new friend, Caroline Water. Now, Caroline, tell me what a couple of, I was supposed to be asking Terry and Donna the same question, which I totally failed. So I'm going to start with you. A couple, like, what were you working on right when this all went crazy?
Sure. I was actually on tour in Scotland, just kicked off our UK tour of Krispel, which is an ice show by Cirque du Soleil. So we were just about to start when all that happened, and we're still at home waiting this out.
Waiting it out. Well,
yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Cirque
you.
du Soleil is a mega animal to be stage managing, so excited to talk to you about that. Next up, we have the incredible Anthony Sierra. Anthony, thanks for joining us. Hey, what were you doing when this all went to craziness?
I was working on the stage management team for an immersive attraction by Tyra Banks called Model Land in Santa Monica. And prior to that, I was at the Walt Disney Company for 4 years.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining. And then we have this little lady who's been stage managing now with us recently, who I love. And we were slated to open a show this Friday together. Please welcome the incredible Talia Krispel.
Hi, y'all. As Tej said, yeah, we're supposed to be in tech starting tonight, actually, for Newsies. But when the world went into the Twilight Zone, I was doing a production of Mamma Mia with 5-star theatricals.
Yay.
Yeah.
And next up, we have Mr. Michael Goff. Hello, sir.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome. Hi, and what were you working on when the world stopped spinning?
I wasn't. I actually had just come home about 3 weeks before then from working on Harry Potter and the Cursed Child in San Francisco.
Amazing. Okay, so that closed down. That was among the first things to close down, right? Because San Francisco was like the first city, I think, in the United States to do a not even shelter in place, but it was like a lockdown, right?
Yeah, March 11th, they closed they temporarily closed the production.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm glad you guys are all. Are you up in San Francisco waiting it out then?
No, I'm not waiting it out. I finished with it on the second week of February. I left it, and now I'm back here in New York City.
Amazing. Okay. Well, still in the epicenter of it all right now in New York City. So that's got to be crazy. Going on to our next one, Megan Letty. Hey, Megan.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. So what were you up to when this all went to?
I had just closed Radio Golf at Trinity Rep. So we had closed on March 1st. And I was actually supposed to be on vacation. And we stopped our vacation and came on home. And now we're in Maine where we live.
Amazing. I'm glad you're safe. And thanks for being here today. Next up is a very talented man who also directed our $1 Million Quartet and stage manages all over all the time, Mr. David Lober.
Hello.
Hey.
I was working on the Lehman trilogy in New York when the shutdown happened. We were four previews in, and had done a couple of weeks of rehearsal in London. Came over and did a week of tech, and shut down after our fourth preview.
Is the plan to come back as of right now?
The plan is to come back. We're not, so far, there's really no word from the office other than we haven't canceled.
Wow, well, that's good. And right before that, you were the PSM for the Dear Evan Hansen tour, right?
I was doing the Dear Evan Hansen national tour, and also had just finished up A Christmas Carol on Broadway right before this.
Well, thank you for being here today. Two more. This woman is fearless, as are all these people, but I've seen her conquer some crazy things here at 3D personally. Welcome, Nicole Wessel.
Hi. So I am still stage managing one show a year for 3D, but I've also been teaching now for 3 years. So I just finished up a week before school dismissals. We actually did our show with my kids. I was so grateful that we had got to do it, Bark. So
awesome. That is a happy circumstance that you guys got to do it right before everything.
Very, very
awesome.
lucky.
That's awesome. Last but certainly not least, because of course with the V in your name and a W in your name, you're going to be at the end of the list. But again, certainly last and not least, a man that stage managed one of our very first shows and has been a staple here at 3D and all over the country at regional theaters, Mr. Vernon Willet. Woo! And also an extremely active and amazing member of Actors Equity. Does a lot with them and can be a great insight into that aspect as well. But Vernon, what were you up to when the world went crazy?
Oh, I was very lucky as well. Along with Terry Hanrahan, we had just closed on March 1st your production of Kinky Boots.
Yeah, what a blessing we got to do that, because it was like by the skin of its teeth. We were like 2 weeks. If it had been 2 weeks in the other direction, we would have had a bad situation. So anyway, yeah. So well, welcome everyone. All right, Talia, take it away. Oh,
I should unmute myself.
You were muted.
Yeah?
You were muted. Now you can take it away.
Hi. So welcome. Thank you all for joining. I'm so happy that so many people have turned out, and thank you to all the stage managers that are here with us today. And thank you TJ and Gigi and 3D for hosting us. So first and foremost, I want to say happy year of the stage manager, year 2020. 100 years ago on February 16th, Equity, and Vernon probably correct me with what I'm about to say, but we were put in as stage managers into the contractual language with Equity. So we kind of like to mark that as our anniversary as being all inclusive with our union. Which is very exciting. So we are celebrating the year of the stage manager, but because of the Twilight Zone, we have now extended it to June of 2021 because we deserve a whole year. So yay, stage management. So I just wanted to start out with, if everybody could just kind of in layman's terms, in like 15 seconds, tell everybody what we are as stage managers, or what you believe a stage manager does. Nicole, do you want to start?
Oh, sure. Then everybody else has to come up with something else, right? We coordinate, we explain what one person is thinking to the other person that's not understanding. And we make sure all that information gets to who needs it.
Great. David, how about you?
That's pretty much the same thing. Somebody asked me this a long time ago, what does a stage manager do in 1 or 2 sentences? And I said, it's to make sure through communication and to make sure that everybody can do their jobs without having to worry about other people's jobs. And that's the basic part of it that I like to talk about. And also there's many other aspects of the job, including technical and coordinating with the crew and calling the show and all those things backstage. But that's a couple of lines about that.
Great. Donna, what about you?
You're right. It is harder after they say it because you go, yeah, I should say that. Definitely, sometimes I feel like an interpreter, from director speak to actor speak to designer speak to, crew speak. So the communication aspect is certainly the part I love. And well, let's go in a different direction of the question, but you get to be part of, you get a piece of the pie, your finger in every pie, so to speak. And if you're the one that understands how that works, you're trying to keep all the wheels turning.
I see, McGough, I see that you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're bridge builders. I think that's what we do, is we build bridges for people to get from, whether it's, the page to the stage, which has been said a million times. But I also think that we spend the time making sure that everyone we represent in the process knows that we understand their vision, so that when they're all not there, they know that their vision is being comprehended and carried out while the show is still running.
Yeah, Anthony, what about you?
Yeah, I would say you maintain artistic integrity by being that communication hub, absorbing all the information, and then sending it back out to everybody else. And that's how you take care of your people internally.
Nice. Vernon?
I think we are great facilitators. We sit within this hub of communication and enable every other artist associated with the production to do their job, as opposed to micromanage and do it for them. We coordinate the talent. We're half psychologists and half air traffic controller.
Yeah. Caroline, what about you? How do you explain it in the world of circus?
In the world of circus, I was just about to say, like an air traffic controller, honestly. It is multitasking at its complete finest. We actually are very artistic and have to be very creative at times, which is something that I didn't, kind of grow into, and you mold yourself into what that means. But definitely at Cirque, we need to be very creative and artistic as well.
Nice. Meg, what about you?
Well, everyone said so many things already, but I know that working with a resident acting company, I know Vernon said the psychology definitely comes in a little bit more when you're working with the same group of people every single show. So with a resident company, you definitely have relationships that have been growing for 30 years. And so every time we sit at the table to do Christmas Carol, again, we have 30 years of feelings and thoughts, and remember that time this was terrible, and remember that time this was great. And I think that's one of the things that's specific to working with a company that does have the resident group of actors. So, but then all the other things, communication, which clearly I'm great at, and just also making sure that we are also trying to be a cheerleader, but at the same time maintaining the artistic, everything that's been built, while we're also in a 70 show run of something nice. Everyone's done for 30 years. So.
And Miss Terry?
Well, as what they said, but one of the things is, I think, especially during that rehearsal and pre-pro process, everybody we're working with is so creative that they can be going different directions. And so we're like a little fulcrum in the center to receive that, to make sure nobody's wonderful creative plan is going to, tromp over the space that somebody else was using in terms of time or facilities or money, whatever it might be. So we keep it hopefully keep it kind of in balance among all the departments.
Nice. I second all of that. I like to tell people that we are the control room, so to speak, so much like air traffic controllers, or kind of like the spoke of a wheel, right? Much to what Terry was saying about kind of being the hub of all information. So how did everybody train for this job, or how did you get into stage management? I'm gonna, instead of calling people out, I'll let people be a free-for-all on this one. And if you so choose to share how long you've been in the business, please feel free to add that in as well. So whoever wants to jump at that one.
I'll win that one.
For the length of how long you've been in the business? You want to tell us, Terry?
I got no competition. How many years? 59 years.
Nice. And how did you get into stage management?
Well, that came later. I did start as a performer, like a lot of people do. I I was actually thinking about that prepping for this. When I started, I was an apprentice when I was 17 at Williamstown. And the equity stage manager who was supposedly sheltering us or shepherding us rather, Mark Healy was his name. I want to share this. He told me I was too nice to be a stage manager. And I want TJ to know that. Because I'm sure none of you who know me believe that. But he told me I was too nice to be a stage manager. And I've spent many years since changing that perception. But yeah, I went into it backwards from just being the little person who would run around and do stuff for people, and it gradually,
But that says, like, you are who you are at your core, because I call her my pineapple. She's prickly on the outside, but she's the sweetest of sweet on the inside. So that's a good stage manager. No, you got to have both sides, right?
Did you go to school for it, Terry, or did you just?
Yes, I went to Irvine. I did study at Irvine, and that's
specifically for stage management.
No, for acting, but we did have to take stage management and a lot of technical things, most of which didn't stick. You can ask Donna, but I did take the class, and I knew that was where I wanted to head. Again, I was very young, so you do need to get a little bit of, I think, strength before stage management is a good fit. So I didn't actually start that until I was probably closer to 30.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I know, Caroline, you went to school for stage management. So tell us a little bit about how you trained for stage management.
Sure. So for education, I'm from Toronto. I had received my BFA in performance production, so we learned basically everything at Ryerson. It was a great program to do. It was good to learn everything since we need to pretty much know all of it. Then after that, I went to Columbia University in New York and did my master's in stage management. Both of those options I did for educational purposes. Eventually, I would like to teach, so I wanted to get my master's. It's not necessary, but it was a great program. And outside of that, I did get a lot of experience in Toronto and in New York. But obviously, Cirque, everybody asks the question of how I got in. And there's no magic in terms of how that happens, but I did know that I wanted to work on large scale productions. And just for me personally, Broadway was just something that I'm Canadian. It's quite difficult, and it wasn't something that I really wanted to spend a lot of time to figure out. I wanted to work on something larger scale. So I kind of chased that, and eventually got into Cirque, and this is my 6th year and my 4th show with Cirque already.
And you did their internship program, yeah, in Vegas? And
yes.
How long were you a part of that?
The internship program is about 3 months. And then after that, they hired me to stay on that show basically until my visa ran up. And then I went on tour.
Nice. Who else wants to share their experience on how they trained for this?
I'll grab it. I, like others, started as a performer, and then when I was in college, I think it was a production of A Man for All Seasons. I wanted to be in the show, and then I wasn't in it, but I wanted to be in the room to see how the play was put together. And so that started how I started stage managing. And then when I was at the end of my college career, I decided that I would always be a sort of short, squat Irish character actor, and that I could come back to that later. So I took a chance and went to grad school at UC Irvine, where I studied back in the 90s, and sort of used that as a time to develop a style, because no one teaches you how to work a room. And so that's how I got my education. And then after that, spent some time in Denver, and then moved to New York in September of 1999.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to chime in?
I'll jump in.
Great.
I was stage managing first in high school. And then when I graduated from high school, I moved right to New York and did something I recommend nobody do anymore, or nobody can do actually, which is open the yellow pages to theaters and start calling them. And I got a couple of jobs from that, and never went to school, but have been working pretty steadily since then, and can sort of trace my career from those first 2 phone calls to my current job.
Nice, thank you. I do know that a lot of us are currently predominantly production stage managers, but I also do know that many of us kind of go into the ASM world as well. So how would you describe the difference between an ASM and a PSM to those that are in the call? and how are your expectations work as the opposite position, or when you go into a show, how do you approach a production from either a PSM position or an ASM position? Nicole, I see you moving.
Sure, yeah, I brought my mic down. Well, I have two people that actually three people here, because I see David Nestor is also watching us here, that I've worked with, as they've all been my ASM, but Donna also, we've worked flip-flopped both ways for each other. So, you know, I view it more as a team than, you know, really this position has to do this or that. And I've approached it, you know, Terry is a very different ASM than David Nestor, as is Donna, and we all have our particular skills. So if you go into it as a team and know, hey, you know, especially in the rehearsal process, this is what I'm better at, and this is what you're better at, or this is what you enjoy more, and kind of divvy it up a little bit that way. Of course, in the show, one person is calling, unless you're in like major tour at Broadway, then you can flip-flop back and forth on that as well. But especially at 3D, I call the show.
That's the way we did it.
I have a question that kind of just, it goes along lines, is that, you know, even as a producer or a director, I'll hear stage management conversations of, and every show is of course different, because every, you know, person has their own way of doing it, but the expectation of like, no, you do the paperwork, no, I do the paperwork, who does the paperwork, you know what I mean? Like, and so there's so many different things, like it feels like everyone has a different expectation, but I always love when I hear this is the way that it's done. And it's like, so I'm wondering, like, so how many of those types of things are like, this is the person that tapes the floor, this is the person that does, are there things that are like that are like, this always is that way, aside from calling the show or being the free-floating ASM backstage? Is there a lot more that's black and white, or is it very, very gray? Each show, each team, each relationship is its own animal?
For me, it's very gray.
I'll agree. With Trinity Rep, we don't have residents, but I do at least 2 to 3 shows with them per season. So we get to know our PA teams and our interns over the course of 2 years. And so the first show with our new groups is always a little bit tricky, because we don't know strengths and weaknesses with our teams yet. So we have to kind of have an idea that, you know, in our situation, the PSM is going to be taking the blocking. And then when we get into tech, the PSM's calling the cues. And then our PAs end up being run crew, and our ASMs also end up being run crew. So the ASM for me is in charge of the backstage. Now, we're not an IATSE house, which once you get into a whole other union,
right, then
no, everyone thinks they're in charge backstage, which is not necessarily always but we all have our own jobs. So we have a deck carp, they're in charge of our automation. We have my ASM, my equity ASM, who I like to have as close to a 0 track as possible backstage, because that's what I prefer, so that they can be available in case. But my ASM typically does the run book, and then we get into a whole other world of what's a run book to you? What does your run book look like? What does this person's run book look like? So it's several tones of gray and I feel like it's that way no matter where you're at. But it's interesting, like even at a place where we have almost the same team for the course of 2 years, we still end up in that gray area too.
Great, and piggybacking off of that, from a theme park perspective, a lot of people don't realize that the ASM teams and the stage management teams, even in rehearsals, are changing every single day, because it works like an operation, right? Everybody's a little bit of a number that way. So everybody has to have the foundation of, we need to know the base of the show and the base of what every single person is working on the day before. And that's pretty much all we have the bandwidth to do. So as long as we realize who we are as people and how we work, then it's easier to anticipate stuff that might slip between the cracks or stuff that we need to focus on because we're stronger in it. So it definitely would be a great area in every aspect because you really have to get to know the person in order to know how you can best support them in whatever project you do.
That's amazing. And I'm not hijacking you. I promise, Talia. I just have 2 more questions.
Go for it.
So I heard, piggybacking on something that Megan said about union houses. So the 2 questions are, do you guys find working in a full union house where it's like you don't touch that or even look at that if it's not your department versus like a kind of an all hands on deck kind of situation? Do you find one being better than or easier for you to deal with than the other, or do you have a preference? And then secondly, do you find that often, because I know sometimes in other departments, you know, that when we produce something, you'll forget to have those conversations at the beginning because you take for granted that everybody just thinks the way you do or that does things the way you do. And then you're halfway through a process and you're frustrated with someone going, I didn't know I was going to be doing the paperwork, or I didn't know I was going to be, you know, responsible for blah, blah, blah. And it's just because it's like, oh yeah, shoot, I've never worked with you or this company or whatever. Do you find that sometimes those conversations forget to happen, or are you all pretty proactive about, you know, pre-production, we're gonna nail all that out?
Well, right. I'll take that one.
Not all at once.
All right. I'll give it a shot. Hello?
Yeah.
We can hear you, Donna.
Well, I was gonna say, I started out with the community theater right out of college. I started working with community theater that eventually built to an equity company. And so I had no assistant stage manager at first. So that's why I do all the paperwork, because I was all there was. I would maybe have a student or an intern or some help. And eventually my stage crew head kind of became my ASM for backstage. So that's how I developed along the way until I got to be with bigger companies and that had more staff and had more opportunity. So, but I do know there's a lot of conversation about the lines about, well, what does an ASM do versus not? To be honest, since I haven't ASM'd very much, I'm going, okay, tell me what the rules are before I step on toes, because I like to have that conversation ahead of time to make sure everybody knows who's on right and who's on left.
Yeah.
I actually am very lucky that there are actually a few people on this call that I've had the pleasure of working with, and many in our panel as well. And I have been lucky that conversation has come right out of the gate. So the second that we're in prep or in the first week of rehearsal, the conversation is quite open about, well, what do I do, or how do you like to do this? Are you okay if I take on this paperwork? Or, hey, I'm too crazy with other things. I work with companies that don't have production managers. So a lot of times those tasks may fall onto me. So I may not have the ability to keep up with blocking. So I may hand that to one of my assistants, or potentially even an intern who wants to learn how to take blocking in a fast-paced environment. Or I will have, Meg and I have worked together multiple times. She is one of the best. And well, all of us on this call are the best, so hire us all, TJ.
So we have so many stage managers that joined, like Jill and Pat, and so many, and David, people that aren't on the panel that should be, certainly could be, should be. So anyway, yeah, yes. So many amazing people here.
And Meg and I work we're very symbiotic. She finishes my sentences, I finish hers. So we're very lucky in that way. And there's kind of this unspoken, you do this paperwork, I'll do this paperwork. And then, you know, when I came to 3D for the first time, I didn't know how 3D worked. So Terry and I sat down and I said, because Terry was my assistant, and I said, how do we do this? How do you do this? Well, this is how I do it. She goes, well, this is how I do it. And we talked about it. And then the next day we were like, okay, this is what's happening. So it's really just about having the conversation, I think. And finding each other's strengths and what works best for you as a team.
And it goes back to all of your original points. I mean, literally the one thing that everyone, and you all contributed something different, but the one thing everyone said was communication. And so obviously in order to be a stage manager, that is the #1 quality I imagine that you all have to have. There's also a question that I think is a great, especially for those of you that are and or were performers. It says, it's from Liz. I'm a performer, but I have become really interested in dabbling in the ASM ADPA world. In the professional universe, do you see a lot of people going back and forth between performing and stage managing?
I'm going to jump in because I have an answer for this one. Well, my personal path. I grew up performing, but the second that I found stage management, I never went back. I was like, oh, thank God, finally something that suits me and my organizational side of my brain, but also my creative side, much like Caroline was saying earlier with Cirque, how creative they have to be. So that satisfied my personal internal artist along with my personal internal OCD mind. So for me, I never hopped back and forth between the two, but I do know that people do, that has happened, or they were a dancer and then once they retired from dancing, they fully went over into stage management. But I personally haven't met anybody recently that goes back and forth between the two. Does anybody else know of anyone?
I don't know of anybody who does that.
I know whenever I audition, I'm too good of a stage manager and I don't get the part, but then they ask me to stage manage the show.
I know of directors and assistant directors who do both. That's something that's more common to me, and I think it's because of the control issues that we all have that may be similar traits in directors. But I do know more directing prospects that end up in our field quite a bit.
Yeah.
The only one I know locally that's doing that is Michael Dotson.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But it's probably, I would agree, Megan's point that it's probably more likely on the production end to flip-flop back and forth between different things. But for those of you guys, especially those of you that are younger, that are dancers, are musicians, whatever, this is such, you know, you have that the famous chorus line question, like when you can't dance anymore, you know, when you can't dance anymore, what do you do? And this is such a beautiful and incredible way to stay intimately a part of our industry and to truly, I mean, like you are leading the emotion of the show, because if you're calling it clean, every little piece of it comes together emotionally, and that's what makes the show magical, is when a stage manager is helping lead the charge that way. And it's something to think about as a career path to transition into, because it keeps you involved, because eventually you're not going to be dancing you know, anymore, and you're not, or whatever. But how those of you I have two more questions. There was a question about education in this particular career path. How, like, when you're getting a job, I imagine it is more relationships and experience than it is where you went to school and what your education was in stage management. But I could be totally wrong there. Have you guys seen education, whether the lack thereof or a master's, if you will, like has that been to your benefit in any way in regards to stage management? I'm not saying you should educate, obviously. And then the other is that I assume people that are dancers, that are musicians, that really understand music and the way that music works, if it's not for straight plays, I imagine that is only to your benefit. And how did you, if you aren't a musician, or if you aren't a singer, if you aren't a dancer, how did you strengthen that skill, or how did that happen for you as far as learning how to call a show right?
I'm going to ask that some of our people that get resumes constantly, perhaps at a Broadway stage door. So David or McGough, like, what do you, kind of spinning off of what Teach said, like when you get resumes at your stage door, like what are things that jump out at you? Is it the education, or is it the experience, or the people that, you know, is that Dempsey?
Yeah.
So I know, like, personally, like, Michael, you're on my resume because I've worked with you. So I know that people, when they look at my resume, they may go, oh, McGough, how do you know McGough? And then we talk from there. So what do you guys look for in that?
I think that the answer is Is it really gray? Yes. Because I think that education is, you know, I wouldn't be the stage manager I was if I hadn't taken 3 very selfish years to go to grad school to figure out who I was and how, you know, and how to do things. But I think that what the benefit of that master's did was it got me to the West Coast. It got me to become the man I wanted to be outside of my small town in Pennsylvania. So there's another level of education. And also gave me contacts on the West Coast and, you know, almost, you know, I was from Pennsylvania. And so it was everything, I just met people. And so that experience really built into how I was gonna get work because I was able to.
So that it wasn't really necessarily the education itself as it was just the process of going through it and the people you met and having to go outside of your small town and all of that. I'm assuming.
But also getting to do so many different levels of production in a place where you were able to make mistakes and it didn't cost you your career. I think a lot of times when you jump right into the New York scene or maybe in Chicago as a production assistant or as an ASM, if you're you know, when you're trying to decide who you're going to be, because you have to decide, am I going to be an assistant stage manager? Am I going to be a production stage manager? And I think that you know, having a chance to make mistakes when it didn't cost me my career was very, very important. But I think when I get resumes, to go back to what you're asking, I think that you know, people only usually put the references for people who are going to speak well of them. So if I can find someone even tangentially or tertiarily who I know, I will call that person to find out about people. I do think an education is important, but I also think that so many things control if somebody can afford a certain education or to be able to get into a certain school. So I think being able to, both things are right. You can come and do internships and PAs and build up and become someone's favorite go-to person, their gal Friday or their girl Friday. And that is just sometimes just as important as the education that you get. It's just what you do with all that information and how you add it up. I think that's what we do.
Talia, take it away.
Oh gosh, more? Okay. I kind of want to go to like a fun kind of question. I don't know where it came from for me personally, but somehow I became very superstitious in theater. And so I do not like whistling in theater. I don't like saying the Lady M show. I refer to it as the Scottish play. I am oddly enough fine walking under ladders, but for whatever reason, those 2 particular superstitions to me are like, no go. So, oh, I said go. So does anybody else have any of these superstitions, or do you laugh at them? Do you make fun of people like me who have them? And if so, what are your superstitions and how do you avoid them?
I'll have a fun one. I don't have those that go on from show to show, but each individual show, there's always something that comes up that I have to do. And so if you notice, I don't know if any of you recognize the show behind me here, but I had to have for this show every time I called.
Oh, spam a lot.
A can of spam
Yes.
in front of me before I did it. So I have little things like that that come up for individual shows, but nothing.
I love it.
I have some weird, I mean, my dash, I call it my dashboard. So I have my hula girl from my vacation with Talia, actually. I have a miniature Sloth from the Goonies figurine. And I line up all my things and they help me call my shows. Every night, so when I do my calls, actually I had multiple actors say, is that a recording? Because I say it the exact same way. And it's just out of habit because I think we all get in our little bubbles of good evening. And we just kind of have the same cadence every time we do it. But I think that also helps the actors feel like we're in a normal situation on the same time. And then I do, before I call every show, over ClearComm to my entire crew, I say the words, let's do this. And it's, I don't know why, it's a part of my breath before I begin my first cue sequence. Just kind of grounds me a little, so.
I know Terry, every single time she calls places, has to be a different dessert or dish from the local like whatever the show is based in. If it's in England, she'll give you an English dish, and she's like, "My little crumpets, it's time for," whatever it is. Yeah.
Little trifles.
Yes.
So, yes.
Yes. Those are amazing questions. So because you guys have been so generous with your time, and we want to get to some Q&As. Talia, do you think it'd be a good time for people, because I know we're also going to lose Nicole Wessel here like any second. But do you guys all have some stories, maybe your most like harrowing or like, I can't believe I had to deal with that as a stage manager type moment, that are just fun, good behind the scenes type things, before we go to Q&A?
I'm going to take the fifth on that one.
Amazing.
I'll jump in. I'll jump in here. When I was, my first Broadway PSM was The Rivals at the Lincoln Center, especially today, thinking about Bernie Gersten passing. And when you work at Lincoln Center, and some of the other regionals here in the city, they have a slightly different feel than when you're just working in a Broadway house or in a touring house. And we had a sort of blessed, knock on wood, tech where things just went. We had a schedule, everything was going great. And we had our first preview the day after Thanksgiving. And the show had a cuckoo clock of a revolve that came in and out of the doors of the set. And the first cue hit and there was no revolve. Oh. And so, you know, here we have a house full of people and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work, it dies. And you know you've done your work getting to know your crew when the IATSE crew of the show says that they will happily carry out all the furniture and put it exactly where you tell them to do it. And so while some technicians worked throughout the first act to get the revolve back up, those guys and ladies brought the stuff out and put it down exactly where myself and the assistant stage manager would say to put it. And that they could have just said, "We're done," and they didn't. And so I'm always grateful for that. And I'm thinking about that today as we think about Bernie and that great institution that he helped build.
That's amazing.
Vernon, you had your hand raised. You want to share a story?
A turntable story that happened at the Colony Theater in Burbank on a production of Sherlock's Last Case with Time Winters and Louis Latorto. We had a 22-foot turntable. And part of our set was a London interior. And the other half of it was a dark, dingy, dank basement. Well, one of the actors during one of our transition revolves decided to try and beat the turntable because there was exactly 6 inches clearance from the back of the theater wall to the furthest piece of furniture on the turntable. Woo, I'm gonna beat the turntable. So we're in the middle of this transition and the turntable stops. And then it starts again in the opposite direction. And I get on headset and say, "What the hell is going on? Who stopped the turntable?" And the person on the other end of the headset said, "Well, an actor stopped the turntable." And it's like, well, what the hell is an actor doing stopping my turntable? Well, he stopped it with his body.
Yeah.
So for some reason, this turntable had an automatic stop like your garage door would. When it encounters something, it stops on its own. So I think that's actually what happened. So here I am going, okay, well, the actor that stopped the show was late for a costume change. If he makes it on, then we'll continue the show. If he doesn't, then I have to stop the show. So he eventually makes it on. I'm watching stage right where he's supposed to make his entrance. I did not see that the fact that there was a big, huge, full-size wardrobe cabinet that had been smashed between the proscenium and the turntable stage left. So my sound person said, "Did you see what's happening?" It's like, "I did, yeah, I'm on it." Well, I'm on the call with the TD saying, "We have 18 minutes to intermission. You got to get here and help me fix this." He did. 17 minutes later, the director is rushing into the booth, screaming at me, "What's going on? I have a plan." It's like, okay, stop. Thank you very much. We have a plan. We also have a show that's going on. Get the hell out of the booth. Long story short, the actor, and I'm not going to tell you which one it was, but he was taller than the other one. Okay. Was safe, and the show continued with a 22-minute intermission.
Wow, David, you had another turntable story. So we're
I have another turntable story. I was doing a Groundhog Day on Broadway, And that show had 5 turntables inside of each other. And the internal turntables, the communication from the computer was sent wirelessly for each cue. And we didn't have a great tech with them. The turntable just kept stopping, and we had issues all during tech. In fact, during previews, I had to stop the show 8 times because of the turntable. But the first preview, we started, we got 15 minutes in, the turntable stopped, and because it's so complicated, the show is so complicated with the amount of turntables and where the turntables had to be, we really couldn't place things on stage and have this show continue the way it was. We were down for about 45 minutes. The producers opened the bar up. The director was there, and we came up with a plan. We finished the show sitting in chairs, concert style. And it was something that the actors were so thrilled with, and I've heard this from a lot of them, because we had been so focused on the choreography and the staging and the complicated scenery moves that just to sit in chairs in front of an audience and see that the story worked was fantastic for them. And what it turned out, it wasn't anything wirelessly. They found it the next day, one of the casters had loosened up and migrated to the other side of the turntable and got jammed. And so there was no way, unless we took every piece up that night. So we were down for about 45 minutes, and we finished the show. We told everybody, you can get your money back or you can stay. We're going to stay, and we're going to do the show in chairs. And we finished our first preview on Broadway in the concert style.
Wow.
You know, I have to say, I saw that show and got to go on stage with you afterwards, and you walked me through it. It was one of the shows where I was like, it is such a crime that there is not a Tony Award for stage management, because it is such, I mean, that so many of these shows, Harry Potter, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. It was one of the most mind-blowing experiences I've ever seen. But like Cirque du Soleil, I mean, literally on down, what you guys do is so incredibly complicated and truly amazing. So anyone else have a story to share real quick before we go into Q&A?
Yeah, Anthony does.
Oh yeah. This one's one from college, and I love it so much. I think about it often. But I was doing a chorus line, and I was calling the music in the mirror, and it's just Cassie on the stage. I had 3 spot operators, and the way that they were set up was that they couldn't really get to each other very easily. So the spot operator was a great actor who had never done spot before. He was just fulfilling his credits. And in the middle of the song, the spotlight on Cassie just starts shaking wildly for no reason. And I keep talking to him, and I'm like, hey, I'll call him Tom. But I'm like, hey, Tom, what's going on? Are you okay? And no response, nothing from Tom. We're getting to like the big moments, and the spotlight's going like way around her. So I had the 3rd spotlight just get big enough to cover that spotlight and also get Cassie, and was traveling with her throughout the whole time. And at the end I said, I don't care what's going on. You're not talking to me. The only thing that I care about is that you turn off the spot with the bump in the music. Please do it at the end. Please do it. That's all I care about, and you will be forgiven. And then at the end, I call the spots out, and 1 second after the blackout, that spot goes out. And I'm like, no, what happened, Tom? And then the only response that I got, and to this day, he swears this was the reason, but all he said was, I had to sneeze.
Ah!
And that was it. And to this day, I had to sneeze was the only thing that he said. And so whenever I mess up something as a stage manager, I just laugh and I just say, oh, I had to sneeze.
So good. You guys is awesome. I'm sure that there are many things that you can't talk about, and tons of things that, you know, stage managers are also the, like, as you said, psychologists and the moms and the dads and the liaison between the producer and the artistic team and the union and all of the things. So you're really heroes, and it's amazing to have you all here today. If you guys have a question for any of these people, or just a general question for the panel, raise your hand so I can see your hand, and I will, myself or Gigi will find you and unmute you, and you can ask away. Oh, yay, Natalie.
Natalie.
Yeah, go ahead, Natalie.
Hi. I've worked with a lot of you, so this question might not be surprising, but I recently got called out for being like an overactive actor, where I tried to fix too many problems on stage.
You? What are you talking about?
Or backstage. And it was an interesting thing to get called out for. And I was wondering, like, is there a line that you feel that you personally have, anyone can answer, but that you could cross, that kind of gets crossed, and where it goes from helpful to hurtful to the overall product?
What a great question. No one has an answer for you.
No one cares. That's fine.
Well, I mean, for me, oh, Anthony, go ahead.
It goes back to artistic integrity always. I think that sometimes when there's miscommunications like that, there's not the backstory that comes with it, or like why it has to be done a certain way, why this philosophy is put in place by the director, or how everybody came together to do that. So I feel like that sort of conversation could potentially stem from just a lack of knowledge about how they got to that place. And it's in no way malicious or being taken as like, you're trying to like change things, but it's very much as in, this is the artistic integrity of the show and this is how it needs to go, right? Versus actually improving the show in some way.
Can I ask a detail too? Were you in a position of authority, like a dance captain or associate or assistant, or were you just an actor?
I was dance captain, and I had a actor get into a car accident and come to me halfway through the show and ask the swing to go on. And I didn't, I guess, negotiate that with the ASM so that the PSM could hear it. And then there was a huge blowout from that. But just in general, I always have the question anyways, because I tend to be someone who wants to stage manage, and so wants to fix things and wants to help the show, you know, move smoothly. And I think sometimes I cross that threshold of authority and have to kind of watch that. So I was wondering if, you know, there's a way in which an actor can sort of watch that line.
That's a great, just so from a dance captain's point of view, stage management panelists, you know, what do you guys, what is that? Do you guys have a specific view on how that kind of situation would, you know, what the proper chain of command is when you're in a show and you have an emergency situation and the dance captain is trying to problem solve something? What is your opinion on that?
Personally, my last Christmas Carol that I did at Trinity, we have a very long run. We open before Thanksgiving and we run all the way past Christmas. And because we're a LORT contract, we do not have understudies. So we had the flu, and I mean all 40 people. And so, and we were at a point where we would basically have to sit out. We had a massive Fezziwigs party dance number. And I would say that after December started, we never did it the same way, because we always had someone out. And the actors were performing in their scenes, but they couldn't do the dance routine, or they couldn't get through some of the bigger numbers. And so my dance captain was also, luckily, in the beginning of my process, he was my choreographer. So Tavon and I would meet every single day, and we together, and I think that's the big thing, is that we need to feel like we're a united front and we're always a team. And I think that when there are the backdoor conversations that feel like decisions are being made without the knowledge of the stage management team, that's when it gets tricky, because ultimately I have to know who I'm calling the cue off of. And if all of a sudden Topper isn't in my number anymore, then I don't, where first the conversation, instead of me calling cues, is where the bleep is Topper. And so it's for us to not just, it's not about control or power, it's about literally just knowing, it's for safety. It's always about, it's safety, it's about making sure that we're in a consistent state of the show, even if we have someone out or a swing going in. And so it's making sure that we're a teammate with our dance captain and not adversaries. So
I'll jump onto that too. I love my dance captains and have always had a great relationship with them. If something happened like that in the middle of a show, I would expect the dance captain certainly to come up with some options, but also to bring it to stage management, because it's not only, as Megan said, you know, I'm looking for somebody on stage, but it's also, do they wear a mic? Do we have to get a microphone to them? Do we have, is it somebody who is not going to make an entrance in the same place? Do I have to tell spots? Do I have options? Do I have an option of one person going into that track versus another person? And so that I would come, you know, with your best options to the ASM if they're close by, or the PSM if they're around. Especially in the middle of a show like that.
Yeah, I think part of it too is I was on stage dance captain, and I had my own show to do. And I think it just got totally cross-wired. And I thought that the girl had cleared it with stage management before. So it was a huge, like, just total miscommunication nightmare. And similarly, it was a Christmas show where in the week prior, we'd had 5 actors out. And so it had been the entire week of restaging the show every single day. So definitely a convoluted.
So like going through the proper chain of command and including everyone, I cannot tell you because other people are going to be thinking about things that are outside of your view, you know. So yeah, it's, and stage management, especially in that of a Broadway show or a tour, when they are the buck stops with them, you know, are definitely who you need to go to. So yeah, it's a great question, Natalie. Great question. Any other questions before we depart? You guys have all been so amazing, to be here to watch and participate, but all of our panelists, you guys, it's amazing. We have such hundreds of shows between you guys, so many experiences. Any other questions or any things our panelists have to say, or Talia?
I don't see any hands going up, Teach.
I don't either. Yeah. So Talia, is there anything you want to say or close with, or another final question you want to pose to everybody?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I had to put away my list because it's 4:04.
All right.
I just thank you all for joining
you know what?
us.
Wait, I'm sorry. We do have a question. Denise, let me unmute you. Go for it. Oh wait. Go. Oh my gosh. Go for it.
Hey guys. So many familiar faces. So happy to see you guys. Question for somebody who's interested in taking this path that does not have a degree. What would you recommend to get started on this path? I've done just a teeny tiny bit. I was PA for Nicole back on Ragtime, but that was a many year ago. But what's a girl got to do? Who does she talk to? I know that there's a lot of equity houses, so I know obviously that's not a route I need to take. What would you recommend?
I know for me, I don't have a degree in stage management. I kind of fell into it. I made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I still continue to make mistakes. But for me, it's about reaching out to stage managers. It's about keeping those connections, and it's about networking and saying, yes, I will PA for you. How can I intern for you? How can I just be in the room? Whether it be in an AD position or as an intern, an unpaid position. As much as I hate the word unpaid, sometimes we have to do that just to get into the room. But I like to reach out to people, and I like to stay connected to everybody. So I was introduced to David. I got to meet David, and I like to stay in touch with him. Same with McGough. We worked on a very small project together, and I try to stay in contact with him. And Vernon, and I've met Donna recently. Vernon, you and I have yet to meet in person, but it's really just about, for me, staying in touch with people and continuing to network, and just putting yourself out there and saying, I want to do this. Let me help you, or how can I help you? And it's really just, for me, is just getting involved as much as you can. And your foot's already in the door as a 3D resident makeup artist. So you're already here in the door, right? So I had no idea you wanted to go into stage management. Now that I know that, I will be calling, you know what I mean? So it's just knowing and saying, hey, this is what I want to do. How can I get out there? Much like Natalie was saying about being a dance captain, but also kind of having that, stage management-ness about her. It's really just about putting yourself in the room and asking the questions and communicating, and not being afraid to say, hey, this is what I want to do. How did you get here? How can I get here? Caroline works for, Cirque, and I've been trying to get into Cirque for forever because it's my dream company. And so I keep in touch with her, and she keeps in touch with me, and she says, send me your resume, you know. So it's really just about constantly trying to be in the room and just keeping connected with people, in my experience.
Anyone else have anything to add to that? Yeah, Megan.
Piggybacking off of Talia, I was a designer first, and I hated leaving shows, was my problem. I did not like the part where they were like, okay, we're good, bye. And I never got to see I didn't get to see the fulfillment of what I had been working on. And then I'd also have questions like, well, why did they do it that way? And then I realized the stage manager gets to know the answers to those questions. But I started switching over after making those realizations, and I got hooked up with an educational department. So I started working for the Brown University MFA program as one of their stage managers. A lot of the PAs that we end up getting at Trinity come through that program. So I worked for Brown University for I think 4 years as one of their stage managers. And then Trinity started bringing me, Trinity Repertory Company, a regional theater in Providence, started bringing me, we stay across the street because the MFA program is literally across the street from the theater, and started being a production assistant for them. And they were the ones who actually gave me my equity card. And I've been with them ever since. And, you know, that opened doors to the Huntington Theater Company. There's another smaller regional theater called the GAM. They do really, really cool work. And then opened doors to some of the musical theater companies in Rhode Island, where I got to work with Talia a couple of times. And then Talia would say, hey, hire my friend, which also helps. So it's a combination of the connections that Talia was talking about, and then also just finding that in. And mine was through working for an educational institution instead of going to one myself.
I think that's an amazing way, because it's this business is about relationships in every aspect of it, from any, you know, whether it's a dancer wanting to, you know, assist for a choreographer, or, you know, assistant director, or whatever it is. And just the more you put yourself out there and ask, which is what I think we're hearing universally, that you'll be so surprised what will come back to you from that, whether in that moment or down the road. So that's a great responses. Anyone else have anything to add before we leave? You guys, a huge round of applause for our incredible stage managers far and wide. We are so grateful for you. Thank you so much.